Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to the WhiskyCast studio in New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is our Whiskey Wednesday webcast for the 29th of July. Hope you've had a good last few days since we last talked on Friday night. It's been another interesting week. The public comment period ended on the U.S. Scotch Whisky tariffs, or to be more precise, the single malt tariffs on whiskeys from Scotland and Northern Ireland, along with liqueurs from Ireland and other countries. We'll be waiting to see what happens August 12th. That's when the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative is scheduled to give the next step and the recommendation that will be published and go into the Federal Register, and a decision on whether to either keep the tariffs the way they are and what they have been since October, raise them, or maybe even add them to other whiskeys from around Europe and more products from within Europe. That could happen too. It's all politics, gang. Once again, we've got a great panel today. Father and daughter distilling team, Stuart Nickerson and Jennifer Nickerson, will be joining us in just a second. If you have questions for our panel, you can always put them in the comment section on the platform that you're watching us on, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope. As always, if you're watching us on Twitter, don't try to put it in the response to the tweet that has this video, because we won't see it until after the show. But if you're watching on Periscope, go for it. We'd love to hear from you. Let's bring in our guests now, Jennifer Nickerson and Stuart Nickerson. How are you guys doing tonight? How are things over in Ireland and Scotland?
Wet, cold, bit rainy.
Well, they're lovely here in Scotland, so a bit dark now, but hey, apart from that, everything's great.
Stuart, we are just having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but I wanted to start off with Jennifer because the last time we talked on WhiskyCast was about 2 years or so ago, when you and your husband Liam were in the process of getting Tipperary Boutique Distillery built. It's built now, and you're almost ready to distill, right?
Yeah, I am. My poor husband is out in the dark and the rain unloading barley right now. So while I'm sitting here chatting to you, he is outside using a forklift to move around half-ton bags of malt. We just need some more permissions from revenue to agree that we're allowed to do it. And then we can start commissioning. So we are so close. Oh, and we need Stuart as well. I forgot that part. We need Stuart to come over and tell us how to commission it.
So you got to get Stuart over there too to get this, because he's still the executive director, even though it's your distillery, right?
Oh, Stuart has all the knowledge. We have a distillery, but we need Stuart to come over and tell us how to work it.
So how did all this start several years ago? Let's go through the whole origin story here. And Jennifer, let's start with you, and then bring Stuart in as we need to.
So I am married to a farmer in Tipperary who grows fantastic malting barley amongst other grains. They also grow oats and wheat. And Stuart was over 1 year, and he was commenting on the fact that we had the ideal conditions to make a great Irish whiskey because we had the raw ingredients. Tipperary is famous for its water, and we're in what's called Ireland's Golden Vale because it's great crop growing land. And we also have a really nice climate. It's generally a little bit warmer than Scotland. Not this year, we're having an awful summer, but generally a little bit warmer than Scotland, but not so warm as to negatively impact maturation conditions. So he was telling us about it was a great site for distillery. And eventually we just decided to give it a go. We did a lot of business plans. I'm not sure anyone realized quite how difficult it would be. But it's taken us, I left my job with KPMG back in September 2015. So it's taken us nearly 5 years to get to this stage. But we're so close. We actually have stills, we have all our equipment in. It's just getting the final permissions to be allowed to do it. And yeah, give me 1 second.
So while she's taking care of the dog, Stuart, tell me how you were stick handling all of this from Scotland, where you're based out of.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me a bit better. It's it was a great opportunity. I've been working as a technical consultant with Rolls Whisky, and I was still trying to build a distillery up in Shetland. And when I was across seeing Jennifer one time, she said it just gives me a great opportunity to get involved properly in Irish whiskey and build a brand and just to have the opportunity to be a great spirit in Ireland.
Let's go through some of your history, Stuart, because you've been doing this about as long as I've been doing radio and broadcast news and stuff like that. Go through the whole resume and tell us how you got to this point. And
I left university in '79, joined a company that made distilling equipment, and from there, a couple of years later, joined Arthur Bells when they're still an independent company as a project engineer. Lived in Dufferin for 3 years, was it? 3 years, that's right, with Arthur Bells, and restarted Blandnock, which had been shut for a while. Then '84 moved up to Highland Park as manager. I was there for 3 years, then to Glenrothes as manager. A couple of years after that, jumped ship to United Distillers, as they were called in those days, which is now Diageo. I was a couple of years there as a project manager, and then I moved back as general manager at William Grant's for the malt distilleries. So that was Glenfiddich, Balvenie, Canby. Then down to Girvan for a year as manager, and then distilling director of William Grant's for 8 years. Left there in 2004 and started my own consulting business. And then in 2006, some people came along and asked me to find them a distillery, which I did. So I bought Glenglass Distillery, which will be mothballed for 21 years, on behalf of some Russian investors. And I became managing director there for 5 years before it was sold on to the Near Group. And then into Shetland Distillery and back into consulting work. And Tipperary was born in 2015. So it's, yeah. And I still love it, Mark. Love it from the day I started and continuing to enjoy doing it.
And we are still having trouble hearing you. I made a couple of changes at this end, and it didn't seem to help matters. But if you could just get as close to your microphone as possible so that we can hear you. I'm not sure if there's a loose connection somewhere on the system, but we'll make this work. Jennifer, I noticed you had a glass of something while he was talking. What do you got in the glass tonight?
It's a sneaky Manhattan. I thought I'd get away with it if I didn't put it in a glass from Manhattan. So I just.
We have no objections to having a dram during this.
But I do have a whiskey glass, so I can have a proper dram as well. But I was going to wait until we got into it before I had that. But I have so many exciting things beside me, and I'm really sorry because we don't have any of them in the US. But if you create enough demand, we'll send them to the US because I'll get my importers to send them to you. But I have all sorts of things beside me. I've got 5 different single casks. I've got a single grain. I've got 18-year-old ex-rum cask. I've got an 18-year-old ex-bourbon. That's 11, and it's sherry finished in a Rioja. Like I have so many fun things to have tonight.
Stuart, a couple of our listeners are suggesting that maybe there might be something covering up your microphone. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know you've got a different set of earbuds there. Let's see if that's all.
Does that make any difference?
A little bit better.
Okay.
Oh, that's better. Let's try it.
Okay,
and
can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. And Charles Epperson has a question, Jennifer. He wants you to show us that poster in the background. He says it looks really cool. What's that poster behind you that features you?
It's a poster of me. It's I was on AIB, which is a bank startup academy. So there's like 10 people chosen from the whole country, and I was one of the finalists. But it's bright pink and it has my head in it, so I like it.
So, do you have anything in your glass, Stuart?
Yes, actually, I do. I have a red wine.
White wine.
Cask from Tipperary, in fact. So Jennifer's just about to put herself on by the looks of it.
I do.
And for the record, since I try not to drink anything from our guests not show any favoritism, plus, if you were watching that countdown video at the beginning, you might have noticed something new. We have a brand new presenting brand partner that starts with us as of today. Our friends at Dewar's have signed on to join Redbreast as our presenting brand partners. And I had this vintage bottle of Dewar's 18 on the shelf, so I decided it was appropriate to pull that down. So sláinte, guys, and we want to thank Dewar's and Redbreast and all of our brand partners, because without them, there would be no WhiskyCast, and I'd have to find a place to store whiskey under the bridge, so to speak. So let's talk about, well, actually, first of all, we have to send our condolences to Dave Kuhn. Sad day yesterday. I knocked a Glencairn off my office desk and shattered it, a Lagavulin 200th anniversary glass. That is a loss. Sorry about that, Dave. But we had a bunch of questions that came in for both of you from the folks at the San Francisco Whiskey Club, and I'm going to bring them up on the graphic because they sent them in via Instagram earlier. They are interested to try your 3-year-old no age statement with the local barley. They also want to know what yeast source you're using, hopefully not generic distiller's yeast like Waterford. And what are your release plans, I guess, especially in the US? An 8-year-old cask-strength release would be desirable. So if you guys want to stick handle those, go for it.
That's very exact, isn't it? It's very specific.
They're precise.
Yeah. Looking forward to our new release. We are releasing in September the first whiskey. It's not even just local barley. It's the first whiskey from barley that we grew ourselves. That my poor husband, who's been sent out to unload all the barley again, grew for us. So that's coming out in September. And that's going to be super, super interesting because it's from one field specifically on the farm as well. And we're really excited to see what happens over the next several years with using different fields, using different crops, different barley strains, what impact weather might have, like all that stuff's gonna be really cool and interesting. Stuart, I know, has plans for yeast. Do you want to let you talk about that?
So at the moment we're not actually distilling. Hopefully should be distilling in a not too distant future. It really depends, I think, on when I get over, unless Jennifer wants to start distilling before I get there. But unfortunately, right at the beginning, it's liable to be generic distillers yeast. So we have plans to try and use some brewer's yeast as well. When I first started in the industry, we used a lot of brewer's yeast in the mix. And I, for one, think it's been detrimental not having brewer's yeast in the mix. So that is definitely a plan for the future. And we will have great plans for varying lengths of fermentation, looking at tap points. To be honest, I'm not quite sure once I get over there when I'm ever going to get back again, because there's so many things I want to try out and see where we get to with it.
And as for that 8-year-old cask-strength release, that's going to be a while, right?
Oh, wait.
What?
That's 9.
That's close enough.
Yeah. 8-year-old from our own whiskey is going to be in around 8 years' time. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then. Raj Sabharwal sending his best to Stuart. Raj is a longtime friend of the show. And Gregoire Sarafian in Paris says the first time you met you, Stuart, you were at a show with Graham Unson, both working for Glen Glassock at that time. Yeah. Enjoyed a lot of your 21, 30, and 40-year-old ladder sherry monsters. Unforgettable.
I still enjoy some of those. I have to say I've got some in my garage, and they're very worthwhile drinking. I'll be honest, I think Glenglass is a fantastic brand.
Yeah.
Probably my favourite whiskey so far.
And it's been 10 years now. Can you believe it's been 10 years since you guys reopened to Glenglassaugh?
Yeah, it was the end of 2008 that the First Minister of Scotland came along and reopened it for us officially. And then the first whiskey ran in December that year. It was a brilliant occasion.
Because I know some 10-year-old just finally got out of there. I saw some when I was in New Zealand back in March. They got the first 10-year-old cask from your distillate that you guys made back then.
I haven't seen that yet. Now you've made me really jealous of you, Mark.
So is there going to be a house style once you start making these whiskeys on the farm?
We'd certainly like to create one. How we define that at the moment without really looking at the spirit and how it runs out and what we get, I wouldn't like to say. Don't want to be tied down on it.
I think I'll just because I know there's a couple of folks saying there that they can't understand that. But I know that he has a great story about Glenrothes and about when years ago when he was at Glenrothes, the reason Glenglassaugh was originally mothballed was because they wanted a specific style from it, and that style just wasn't working with the conditions that they had, with the water that they had up there. And he said that they actually even tried shipping water up to Glenglassaugh, and it just wasn't working with the conditions that they had. So we don't want to pin ourselves down too specifically to a style right now until we've started messing about with the stills and until we see what's coming off them and play around to find out what works best with the water that we have, with our grain, we might stick it into casks and decide we need to go a different way with our specific maturation conditions. So it's going to take us just a little while of messing around to get something that we're 100% happy with. Is that fair enough, Stuart?
Yeah.
I'll speak for you. Just ask me questions. I'll give you Dad's answer. It's fine.
It's very difficult to define until we at least get some distillation done.
It's worse.
Sorry?
That's worse. That's better now.
And Charles Epperson wants you to explain what style didn't work, or do you know yet?
Oh, not specifically with ours, but in Glenglassaugh, they were looking for a style to go into. Was it meant to mimic Glenrothes?
They were trying to mimic Glenrothes.
Yeah.
They even got to the extent they carted soft water. They carted water from Glenrothes by tanker to Glenglassaugh to try and produce a spirit there. But it just didn't work. So they just reverted to Glenglassaugh and then eventually closed Glenglassaugh because they couldn't mimic Glenrothes.
Yeah, so
having run both of them and produced spirit of both of them, I know which is my favourite. But to be honest, they wanted Glenrothes to go into famous price, and that's what the business was about and what the business was built on. So from that point of view, it was a good decision.
It's totally fading in and out.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think we're going to have to apply some percussive maintenance and smack the side of the computer a little bit.
I don't know. I don't know what's happened.
But I think what Stuart was saying, and he can nod at me if he agrees with me, but I think what he was saying was that they were trying to mimic Glenrothes for inclusion in a blend, and they even tried shipping the water up to Glenglassaugh for distillation, and it still didn't. They still couldn't mimic it exactly and get what they were looking for out of it for inclusion in the blend they were looking for.
Jennifer, what prompted you to get out of the real world and decide to finally start making whiskey? Because you had a career outside in the real world, and
I was a tax advisor, and I got paid every month, and it was lovely. I got married.
paychecks are a nice thing, aren't they?
I really liked regular paychecks. I'd like one again. I got married, and my husband is an engineer, but he's also a farmer. And his line to me was that you can't put the land on wheels. So we had a bit of discussion back and forward, and I've always been a great believer in that you should regret taking risks rather than regret not taking them. So I thought this could be something really amazing and really great if we got it off the ground. And so I said I'd rather take the risk and try and do this than not try it and stay at something safe. And I think now it's coming to the stage where like it's really cool and really exciting, and like I can't wait to get our whiskey from our own barley out there. I can't wait to start distilling. And I can't wait eventually in 3 years' time when we have whiskey that's from our own barley that we've distilled on site and matured on site. That's going to be really cool. But yeah, like the first 5 years, it's 5 years of slogging away just trying to get it up off the ground have been tough. I think everyone would agree that they're being tough. Thanks very much, Charles.
Yeah, as Charles just said, Jennifer, the whiskey world is better off now that you are not getting a steady paycheck. Jennifer may not be, but the whiskey world is. And our pal Ed Patrick in Toronto says, Stuart, you've got to come back to Toronto someday soon. Hopefully there'll be a day soon when we can all travel once again and get together. And that would be a good thing once that happens. So, Jennifer, tell me about the fun you've been having the last few days just trying to get the final pieces put together before you can start distilling. What's left, and who do you have to pester to get the final approvals?
I have to pester my revenue person, and I'm worried about saying too much negative. Well, I'm being regarded, but I really need the revenue to come out to me. And this is fine to say. So there's only one revenue person in the entire county, but the county deals with mine. So there's only one revenue person now that can give me approval to start. And she was on holiday for a couple of weeks in July, so like that doesn't happen there. And now she's gone to part-time work for the summer. And now she's back on holiday again till after the bank holiday weekend, which is like next Tuesday. I'm a little bit I feel like there should be more support out there. I feel like there should be someone else to look after her role when she's not there, because I literally cannot start distilling. I can't even start looking at my bond until she approves what I'm doing. And I need her to come out and look at my stills and approve what I'm doing. It's an absolute nightmare. Everything else is done. We need to do a little bit with the chiller, and obviously like Stuart needs to come over and actually start the commissioning, but it's really pointless until we get revenue to prove that they're happy for us to go ahead. And like, I've been trying to get her to come out to me since the start of July, and we're now nearly in August. Like, it's it's a nightmare.
Are they on Twitter or someplace where we can pester them?
Please don't do that. Please. She owns, like, she holds my life in her hands, okay? So like, I'm practically sending her roses. Like, while I'm very frustrated right now, I really like you if you ever watch this, and please, please come and visit me and tell me it's okay to start.
Matt Keller says he's enjoying your watershed whiskey tonight. Wants to know if there's any pictures online yet of the stills in the plant at the distillery. Have you posted anything yet?
I don't think we've put anything online. I might do. If Stuart agrees, I'll put something up. What do you think?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I'll pop something. Do you know what I'll do, Matt? If you follow us on Instagram, because we haven't done a full official press release yet, but if you follow us on Instagram, I'll pop it up in the Tipperary Boutique stories. So if you're there in the next 24 hours after we finish this, you'll see it you'll see a few pictures in our stories.
Great. And I know that Matt will appreciate that, and all of us will, because we can't wait to see what you've come up with.
Just in case anyone is under any illusions, we have the tiniest, dinkiest, cutest little distillery you've ever seen in your life. Like it has a 200 kg mash tun. Like
Okay.
we're adorable. Like it's so small. You're gonna love it.
So it's the Scotch Terrier of distilleries then, right? Small but mighty.
Yeah, it's very, very small.
And Matt Kelleher says, excellent. So they'll be looking forward to that. And we'll ask, Chris asked this question for Jennifer, but we'll ask it of both of you. What was the biggest unexpected hurdle from deciding to start for now? And what would you advise to someone following in your footsteps? Because I can imagine that a lot of what you're going through now, Jennifer, Stuart, you went through 12 years ago, reopening Glenglassaugh, except that you had an existing plant to work with, but it still needed a lot of work. So what were those things that you had to do that you learned from that were the unexpected things that came across?
Jeez. I think the unexpected, well, for me, the unexpected things is forgetting half the things that are just obvious.
We're having trouble hearing you again, Stuart.
Sorry, I was saying it's forgetting the obvious things. Just because they come so natural, you don't always write down the things that are obvious and tell them to everybody else. You kind of expect people to know them, and you don't, just because they're so natural to me. And I wouldn't say the biggest hurdle, unexpected hurdle. I can't think. Actually, being let down by some people at times. It's been a challenge for us in Ireland. I would think that's the biggest challenge from my point of view we've had. The other one is just we're so far apart. Ireland and Scotland are close, but it's a long journey to get there.
So Stuart's few things there were that being let down by people, forgetting the obvious things because they come naturally to him. So I think that's his way of saying that he forgets he has to tell me things sometimes because he thinks they're obvious and they're not obvious to me.
Yeah.
And the last one was being so far apart. Like we're not, I suppose we're not that far apart in US terms. Like I don't think anyone from the US would consider a 45-minute plane ride far apart, but we are far apart in the sense that we're in technically different countries. So like right now in COVID, Stuart would have to quarantine for 14 days if he came here. So while that makes things a bit tougher. Like I think most of the hurdles you kind of forget after they're sorted. Like so when I first started, getting decent internet was a hurdle, and like I'm not even exaggerating when I say that I nearly cried some days. Like I couldn't get 1 megabyte download, and it was so bad. And I've totally forgotten about that now that I've got my internet sorted. But at the time, it was a massive hurdle. And then I didn't know how to do things all the time. I didn't know how. I didn't think about the fact that these come with like a capsule on the top of them. And so I had to find somebody to sell me a capsule. And I know that sounds really, really stupid, but you've sorted everything else and you're like, oh, I don't have a capsule because a capsule never occurred to me. So yeah, I think that your biggest hurdle is the one that you're having that week. And then it's over and you've sorted that one out. And so that doesn't occur to you anymore as being a hurdle because that's solved. And then you're on to the next problem. So like this week's problem is the fact that we couldn't ship. They didn't want to put our malt bags, our half-ton malt bags on pallets. And the shipping company would only ship them if they were on pallets. So we spent like hours calling around trying to get someone to ship them not on pallets, which it sounds really, really stupid. But like, I just have different hurdles every week. And once I've solved one, there'll be another one comes along that like, I don't know how to fix. And then now I have a distillery and I'm going to have a million problems that I don't know how to fix. I can't wait for that.
You'll get through it. And I like this comment that Dave Kuhn posted, referring to you guys as perhaps the Edra Dower of Ireland with that little wee distillery. So,
smaller.
and of course, Greg points out that things have changed recently. There are 10 to 12 distilleries smaller than Edward Dower, with Amandirg at, I think, 20,000 liters per year. And now, Charles Epperson just went to your website. What does From the Heart of Golden Vale mean, or where did it come from?
Yeah, I'm retweaking my website, so I know it's out of date. But the Golden Vale is it's a area of Ireland that's like a swath of land that runs through about 3 different counties, and it's called the Golden Vale because it's really good land for growing crops. So in summertime, it just looks gold because all our crops turn obviously gold in the summer, and you just get fields and fields and fields of gold. So it's called the Golden Vale.
Stuart, let's check your microphone now that you've switched
Does
things.
that work any better?
Yes.
Hi.
Now we can hear you. Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't understand though, because I'm hearing you through the computer.
Okay.
But
That
hey,
may be part of the problem because it was picking up the wrong microphone.
yeah.
And Dave also likes the new Tipperary website, and he's a creative director for what that's worth. But he's curious about how full your cask offer is. We don't make a big deal about cask offers because almost every distillery is doing them. But tell them about the cask offer and what you guys are working with.
We've been chatting about this. We're still offering the cask offer, and all the details, as Dave has nicely pointed out, the brown envelope will be coming your way, Dave, are on our website. So if you pop over there, go into, I think it's under whiskies, and then the cask offer. There should be 2 documents there. Now, they are out of date. They do describe what we were doing previously, which was using our own barley and filling somewhere else. But what we'll be doing in future, as soon as my revenue person comes, we will be filling on site on the farm. So it'll be our own barley, filled on site, matured on site.
So, Stuart, now that we can hear you, what do you think when Jennifer calls you with all these little problems, like I can't get the revenue person to come out and stuff like that? And you've been dealing with stuff like this for decades. What do you think when you hear all these issues?
What I think is I plug in the headphones that don't work properly and then pretend I didn't hear her. No, I just think, God, that's 20, 30 years ago. It's the same type of problems that always occur. Revenue, HMRC, call them what you will. I'm sure it's the same in America as it is over here. They are law unto themselves almost. And the health and environmental health and safety people are not too far away from that either. And I understand a lot of it, but at times we're a small business that are doing everything right. And what we're trying to do is to get a business up and running and move it forward from there. So, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say on that one.
Let's also talk about what you've been doing up at on the Shetland Islands, up on with Saxe-Fjord and on the Isle of Unst. What's going on up there these days?
What's going on up there is we're still making gin. We've been making gin since 2014. That was our first gin. So we have just imported our first pallet of gin into America. So that landed in California, I think about 2 weeks ago or so. We produce a blended malt there as well, and that's been selling reasonably well. We've sold that into Canada now. Haven't had any in the States yet, but it's been selling into Canada and primarily into BC. And the plan is to build a distillery ultimately up there. We're still in the process, I'll be honest, of looking for somebody who is going to help come and finance us. So that is the other project I'm primarily involved in, apart from obviously doing some independent bottlings, which I still do as well. I'll be honest, I don't send too much out to the States just because of the 75 centiliter bottle size. So I sell everything by individual cask, and primarily into Asia these days, although I'm selling a wee bit into Europe as well. But more and more time's getting spent over in Tipperary, which is fantastic, and it's all about focusing on trying to get the distillery there built. So somewhere between Tipperary and going to the most northerly island in the UK to look at what's happening there and plans for there, it kind of stretches me a wee bit, Mark.
I can imagine with the pandemic and with all the economic uncertainty right now, it's even harder to find financing for that distillery up north.
It is. We actually had somebody lined up to give us a finance, and that fell by the wayside. And in some ways, we were lucky, because I think if we'd kind of signed everything and then it had fallen through, it would have been worse in some ways. So at least we weren't quite over the line on that one. Thankfully, with the pandemic, the gin's come out of it reasonably well, actually. We've got a reasonable deal with a multiple in the UK that likes our gin for Scottish Gin Weeks 2 or 3 times a year, and that helps us. And we've got a growing export market from Japan, as I say, all the way around to BC. So it's coming along, and it is growing, which is great. I'd still like to be building the most northerly Scotch whisky distillery, having once managed the current most northerly Scotch whisky distillery. I'd like to build the newest one. But
is Highland Park still technically north of Wolfburn?
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, Wolfburn's on the mainland of Scotland. Right. The Orkney Isles are further north than that. So Highland Park's slightly further north than Scapa. So Wolfburn is the most northerly on mainland UK. Highland Park's the most northerly whisky distillery in Scotland. And the Shetland distillery, which only produces gin, is the most northerly distillery in the UK. Because actually, once you leave us, there's a small bit of grass and there's some cliffs and some puffins, and that's the end of the UK. So that's where our distillery is, in Shetland. We are very, very far north. We are slightly over 60 degrees north. So it's a long way.
And Graham Fraser says, no offense intended here, no insult, but someone needs to write up a Setting Up a Distillery for Dummies book. That would be a bestseller these days. Everybody wants to get a distillery.
Yeah, well, I sometimes think I'm a dummy with all the things I forget, but hey, that's life.
Well, what was it? I have to ask.
Yeah.
Back when Jennifer and Liam came up with this idea, I know that you took a look at the farm and said this would be great for a distillery. But what did you think when she said, I'm going to quit this job as a tax advisor and set up a distillery? As somebody who'd been in the business for so long, what did you think?
What was your idea?
Well, I thought it was a great idea. I mean, there was a lifestyle change for Jennifer, but having said that, she was having to travel 2 hours to see Liam, as it was. So setting up the distillery was going to be great. I think it was slightly different in those days because there weren't too many distilleries in Ireland at that time, and there was potentially access to spirit, but suddenly Irish whiskey's taken off and the access to the spirit has dropped a lot. The funding that we were hoping for never really came through, so we had to do all the funding ourselves to make sure we got the distillery up and running. So that, while that has taken longer, I think, I hate to say it, but it's probably been a great learning exercise for Jennifer. And, she's done extremely well along the way. And, she was a whiskey brand ambassador of the year for Irish whiskey a couple of years back, or last year maybe. She's just disappeared again. So I think it's been a great learning exercise as well.
Everything okay, Jennifer?
I would like to point out that the reason I have to get up and go to the door several times is your dog, Stuart, barking and starting off all the rest of the dogs. Okay? So Stuart's dog now lives with me, and he is unruly, is how I would describe him. He is a Scottish Terrier, actually. He came from Scotland, and he's a terrier. and he's unruly. So apologies, everyone. I have to go off occasionally.
It's fine. I've got my daughter's dog laying here at my feet, just hoping he doesn't pull the cables out of stuff, which he did earlier today. I'm going, don't do that, Bear. Come on. So you mentioned the boom in distilleries and the boom in whiskey in Ireland. How hard has it been to source casks for the stuff that you've been trying to put out in the interim until the distillery is up and running?
I actually think we've done reasonably well. At times we've been looking for casks and they've disappeared almost before we got the opportunity to take them. But people in the industry in general have been very helpful towards us and have offered us casks, and we've had a good range of casks to select from. And I think we've got a really good selection because of that. Most people actually have been extremely helpful, as they would be in Scotland, and I'm sure all over the world. It's a helpful industry, but sometimes I think because we only want a relatively small number of casks, people almost have been more willing to help us than if we'd wanted, hundreds of casks at a time. Not sure what you think, Jen.
I suppose you always want more. Like, I'd like to have all the money and buy more casks and do more things. But I think we have been kind of selective because we only wanted things that we really liked, and we wanted to do a bit of a balance between showing the versatility in the industry and also picking things that we thought were good whiskies. So we wanted things that were quite balanced. Wanted things that had a certain degree of complexity around them. And we've also, we've bought casks, like I think I mentioned before, I've got rum, I've got sherry, I've got bourbon sitting beside me. I've got non-age statements all the way up to 18-year-olds. So we've kind of gone a little bit all over the map, but had in our heads that we wanted something that we wanted quality to shine through. So the next tough bit will just be, because we've kind of stalled that now and we're putting everything into laying down our own whiskey. And so the next bit will just be the transition into releasing our own whiskey and making sure that the quality that we're releasing, while the whiskey won't be identical, that the quality is at least as good, we would hopefully say better than what we've released so far.
And Graham Fraser wants to know if you have any plans to make a single pot still whiskey.
We have pot still down already. So it's our own barley distilled at another distillery. Our aim is to get the single malt right first. So we've kind of had a few discussions about this, and our aim, we've got 4 stills in place. One's a gin still. We've got another 3, and the aim is to first of all concentrate on double distilled single malt, and once we have that right, we'll mess about and see what else we do after that.
I think the other thing just to say is the Pachin that we released is actually pot still.
That's pot still, yeah.
Yep.
It's 50% malted and 50% unmalted barley from our farm.
Interesting, and that's only available in Ireland. I haven't seen that over here in the States.
No, because we did a run, and this is our problem with your 75 cl bottles again. We did a run of 700 ml bottles, and we were like, so Ireland has it. There's a bit in Italy, and there's some in Belgium now, I think. But there's none in the States because the problem with the States is that you have to be doing a decent size run to do it. So, sorry guys. I feel really guilty every time I talk to someone in America, and I'm like, no, you can't have any of the nice things we've done.
That's why we can't have nice things, because we have stupid regulations.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
But we've got an audience. We've got people watching from all over Europe tonight, too, so it's okay. But Chris Ratcliffe has another good question. If you're designing a distillery or trying to adapt an existing one, how do you decide on things like still and condenser design and size? And how does a flavor profile meet an idea on paper? Because obviously you can design the stills to produce the kind of spirit you want, but it's sort of that chicken and egg thing. Which comes first, the spirit or the still concept and designs?
It's a difficult one because I would always ask the customer what flavor profile they're looking for, and from there try and get stills that you think is going to help achieve that. But you have to remember that the water source and the barley, the way you run your mashing, the way you run your fermentation, and the way you actually run the stills all help create that flavor. They're all elements in it. So it doesn't mean if you take a Macallan still and put it on the end of a mash tun that you'll automatically get a Macallan style whiskey. That isn't always going to happen. So there's a lot of movement or a lot of work to go in to try and create the profile you're looking for. And then once you actually get it started, to keep working on it. It's not that easy to just suddenly turn around something, because you think just putting a Macallan or a Glenfiddich still is going to create that style whiskey.
And you mentioned size as well. Like, size is normally determined by your projections and where you see your output going, and that determines what size of still you need. But then that creates its own problems, because when you go to expand, do you, like, if you get a bigger still, is that going to impact your flavor profile? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think probably for me, the one I always think of is William Grant bought the original stills from Cardew. And ever since then, Grants have always just increased Glenfiddich by buying more and more stills. Now, if you go to Cardew today, the stills are far, far bigger than the Glenfiddich stills. So that tells you something immediately. So I would always, once I had a distillery, I would like to think I followed the Glenfiddich model. That meant you increase size by repeating the size of your stills.
Was it a mistake for Cardew to use the same size stills, but just make them bigger and expand the size?
I don't
change the spirit.
I wouldn't say it was a mistake, because it's a good product. We're talking hundreds of years, but I would just say it's not the same product as it was when William Grant bought them in 1887, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think Forsyth's great-great-great-grandfather was building the stills back in those days. But
yeah,
Frank DiBernardi in France asks if you're planning to mature any of the whiskey in the small casks like you did it with the octaves at Glenglassaugh.
Hi, Frank. Yeah, we would like to do some of that. We actually have 2 of those over in Ireland at the moment, I think.
You do? You brought them over in your car one day?
Yep, and there's another 3 in my back garden at the moment that'll be heading over to Tipperary. But will we do the same system which we did at Glenglassaugh, which was to sell those to private individuals? We'll have to look at that, because those octaves are now a ridiculous price, is the way I would like to put it. I was quoted over £300 for one the other day.
I have issues with them as well. Like, they've got really high evaporation, and like that's fine if you're having summers like we're having right now, where it's freezing with us here just now. It's down at about 12 degrees or something right now, centigrade. I can't convert that into Fahrenheit. But if we have a summer like we did 2 summers ago, I don't know if Stuart remembers, but our warehouse was warm, like. And I'd hate to have the octaves sitting in that warehouse in that heat. So we're going to be playing around with them, but we might not offer them to customers, because I don't know how happy I would be personally if I bought a cask and half of it was suddenly gone.
Yeah, certainly as anybody that bought one at Glenglassaugh knows, the average loss was roughly about 6% per year. So you lose your cask very quickly. Having said that, they do make very good Very good spirit. Yeah.
Whiskey Jason wants to know when new bottles will be coming to Germany.
Soon.
Okay.
There's no other comments. Soon.
Soon. Yeah.
Bill Ricker says we got to get TTB to allow 70 Ls for small runs. So he says the 75 CL regulation was not stupid when we were converting from metric in the Carter administration, but preventing import of EU standard bottles is stupid now. And Greg in Paris follows up, for the legal experts here, any chance to see a standardization of containers someday? There is some progress on that. The TTB is considering a regulation that would get rid of the set standard sizes for bottles in the US and essentially set a minimum at 50 mLs and a maximum, say, 1.75 liters, but then let whiskey makers and other spirits makers do whatever they want in between.
Yeah.
That's on hold right now because the industry is not in favor of it. The Distilled Spirits Council opposed that. They would like to see some standardization of limits in there. Largely, I think, because there are certain vested interests. They have companies on both sides that of the Atlantic that have vested interests in keeping things the same way. But that rulemaking process is sort of kind of on hold. The last time I checked, they were too busy getting all the other regulatory changes they wanted to make through first. So we might see something on that at some point soon. But I think that would be welcomed by just about everybody. And just wanted to answer that real quickly here. Now, we did have one from Charles wanting to know if Liam is doing anything special in growing your barley on the farm, any new or different techniques or even strains of barley.
So that is an interesting question. Right now, no, we are doing, we had Olympus for the last 2 years and we've changed this year. I can't remember off the top of my head what we've changed to, but we are trying a different strain, but it will be quite a common strain. We might go to doing other strains with barley later on. But our problem is efficiencies. So we do like a field, and the whole thing's quite large. So you normally do a field at a time, and like one of our fields would do our production for the entire year. So until all of you people start buying enough of my whiskey that I can start like 24-hour production and expand, I can only do one field at a time, and so one barley type at a time. I did suggest that he started going organic, and he laughed at me and absolutely refused to even entertain the idea of going organic for me. So that one's out the window for just now anyway. But if you lot all clamor and like send him lots of messages on Twitter about going organic, maybe we can beat him down.
And P.T. Wood, who is at Woods High Mountain Distillery in Colorado and is on the American Craft Spirits Association board, says that maximum was 3.75 liters, and the ACSA did support that change. Once again, Discus, which represents small craft distillers, but primarily the big boys and girls of the industry, had opposed it at the time. That's sort of still in regulatory limbo, but let's go to that point. Dave Kuhn had a really good question here. If you could create a perfect whiskey from aspects of other existing whiskeys, what would that imaginary recipe be like? For example, the salinity of Talisker, the grain highlights of Bruichladdich, etc. What would it be? What would you put together, Stuart?
Jeez. What a great question. I think I would... I think I would be looking for some of the sweet floral notes of Fiddich. I'd be looking for, and I like the salinity, minerality of Talisker. I really like Talisker as a whiskey. And the peatiness, I've got to wonder which one I'm choosing here. Probably a Lafroig. And yet when I say that, I know that probably my favourite whiskey is more from the Highlands and the peatiness that come through a Glenglassaugh. But that's going to be the range because I like the saltiness, some sweet floral notes, and I do like peat. But it's a bloody difficult question. Sorry.
So let's ask it to Jennifer then.
Yeah.
If it's bloody difficult, let's put you on the spot.
Yeah.
What do I'd have to go? Oh, could I have two? Because like, I'd really like to go with something with like massive big peat. Like I love Lagavulin or Lafroig, both types of peat. I just think they're like fab. And I've got slight issues with the sustainability. So we haven't done any peat so far because I'm not 100% happy about sustainability in peat and like how we do it. So I've not done anything myself, but I adore peated whiskey. So ideally, I'd love to have something in my range that borrowed from those big Islay whiskies. And on the other hand, I'm probably, oh gosh, I like so many though. But then I like the really like delicacy of like, the Compass Box hedonism. That's in green. That was really cool. And then I like some of the other independent bottler that did a mix of all the different island whiskies. That was really cool.
One of the Douglas Lang whiskeys, maybe?
Yes, it was Douglas Lang. And they did, I know Dave was on earlier, so maybe we might remember the name of it. But that was fantastic. That was really cool. And that was nice and balanced.
The Epicurean, Scallywag was Speyside. The Epicurean, I think, was the Islands one. Rock Oyster was the Islands one.
Rock Oyster, yeah.
Rock Oyster.
Yeah.
I loved that. I thought that was really nice. But then I like wine finishes as well. So like we've got a Rioja finish that's really popular right now. And like it's just fab. Like the sherry and the Rioja interaction, I think is just gorgeous. There's too many. I can't pick because then if it's a different day, I want a different whiskey. I don't know. That was a really hard question, Dave. Really hard.
Okay, so how do you take this and turn it into a range then of whiskeys that you're going to sell under the Tipperary label?
I do another whiskey cask and ask people what they want and use their ideas.
Well, that's what we're here for, is market research for you guys. Any final thoughts? We've gone an hour or so now. Any final thoughts that you can share in terms of when we're going to see the next release coming out? Because I think Knock Meal Downs was one of the US releases, and there was a second one that we haven't. I'm whiffing on the name of it right now. But when do we see another release widespread?
Watershed will be back very shortly. We're bottling. It's meant to happen today. It's definitely going to be by the end of the week, and it'll get picked up and it'll be in the US shortly. So Watershed will be back, and then we are releasing our first whiskey from our own barley in September. So I'd say that's the next big thing. So, and it'll be a label change as well. So keep an eye on our social media, and we'll be splashing the label all over the place so that we make sure that you can recognize it when we're there. Please buy us. I would like a decent paycheck again. Please buy our whiskey.
Got to support small businesses, gang, no matter where they are, whether they're in Ireland, Scotland, the States. We got to support small businesses because that's where the backbone of this industry is. And with that, I want to thank both of you, Jennifer Nickerson, Stuart Nickerson from Tipperary Boutique Distillery in Tipperary, Ireland, one of the really beautiful spots of the world. If you get a chance to go to that part of the country or the part of the world, you need to go and visit. And will you guys have a visitor center at some point?
Hopefully at some point. We won't in the next while, but if people pop me an email or pop me a message, then I normally try and sort them out.
Okay. Stand by for just a second here. Let me say goodbye to everybody. And don't forget to join us on Friday. We'll have our Writers Roundtable this week. Gabrielle Farms will be joining us, a bourbon writer based out of Texas. We'll also have Scott Brunel from the Scotch Test Dummies, who will be joining us with details on a special charity auction that the Dummies are doing on Sunday, August 2nd. You may have heard about our pal Brett Ferenz, the Scotch Trooper, who is fighting pancreatic cancer right now. They've set up a GoFundMe campaign to help Brett out. If you've seen his photos of various action figures, Star Wars figures with various whiskey-related poses, things like that, you've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of them over the years. I know I have. Like a lot of freelancers and a lot of writers in this industry, Jennifer talked about not getting a regular paycheck. There's a lot of us in the industry that don't get regular paychecks and the benefits that come along with that. And Brett is in treatment and doing well, and posted a tweet today on Instagram thanking everyone for their support. There's a charity auction on Sunday on the Scotch Test Dummies website, and I will be putting up one of my exhibition prints for that auction as well. There's going to be all kinds of whiskey memorabilia and collectibles on there, and Scott will be joining us on Friday with some highlights on that as well. We'll also have more whiskey conversation for you coming up. And don't forget to join us for the WhiskyCast podcast this coming weekend. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I hope you had a good time. And tell your friends, and we'll see you on Friday night. Good night, all.